right, Beach Theory. Welcome back to season 2, where we talk all about our childhood memories, experiences, and everything that we did as kids.
Yeah.
This kind of sets the foundation of where we came from before we met.
Yeah. And I think that's important to note. What year are we on?
Well, let's talk about what happened next. So my mom married my stepdad, and he was Bolivian. I think I talked about this in the last podcast. I can't remember or not. But he was great guy. He owned his own accounting business. He took over from his father, who had done accounting before him.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had never been married, didn't have any kids, but he married my mom, who had 5 kids.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, but you know, my mom was a model. Like, she was beautiful. So
Yeah.
I think it was easy for him to fall in love with her. And
is beautiful.
Is beautiful. That's right. Absolutely, no questions asked. But at the time, you know, I think she was in her early 30s.
Okay.
And I think that, you know, she's really fun personality, really happy person, really nice, friendly, kind, beautiful, like literally everything anybody would ever want in a good woman and a good wife. And so I think it's no surprise to me that she was only single for a year or less than a year before she got remarried.
That's a feat in and of itself. And the first time I heard that was so amazed. Because there's a lot of people that, you know, when they have 5 kids, it's like, well, good luck with that, you know. But she did it. She married somebody who was okay with it, and it worked out.
Yeah.
For the most part, you know. I think it was rough in some places, but it worked out.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot more to that story than I'm aware of, because I was only 6 years old when she remarried.
Yeah.
And you know, when you're 6, you don't have a lot of control of your life or your environment. So we just kind of go with the flow. And really, I think my memories of my life really don't start to pick up until after my mom married my stepdad.
So you don't have a lot of memories before?
I have very few, and I've talked about them, memories of my real dad. And so I called my stepdad Dad all growing up. I remember my mom asked us kids, hey, because she was pregnant a couple years after they got married. She was pregnant, getting ready to have Johnny, their first kid together, my mom and my stepdad. And she said, you know, your dad would like you to call him Dad, or your stepdad would like you to call him Dad, so that way when we have the baby, he learns to call him Dad too.
Oh, that's an interesting conversation I've never heard about, but
you never
obviously
heard about
had to happen, because
right.
I'm sure.
So we were like, I remember us kids had just called him John up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that day on, we called him Dad, and I don't have any problems. I never had any issues calling him Dad my whole life. And even to this day, I prefer to call him Dad, even over my biological father. But just because he was there, he raised me, you know.
Not because of a lack of love, not because of anything wrong, just that's what you prefer.
That's what I prefer.
That's what's comfortable.
And I'm allowed to have a preference.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think it's fair for anybody to expect me to do something I'm not comfortable with or don't want to do. And
yeah.
I want to call my stepdad Dad, and he'll always be my dad.
Yeah.
No matter what.
So this was what year was this when that happened?
This would have been, so they married in 91. Marshall was born in 91. And then I think a couple years later, I don't really remember how it worked. We moved into a house. We had been renting when my mom got married. And then we moved into a house. After the divorce, we were living in Ocoee, Florida. And then my dad bought a house in Pine Hills.
Which is also known as Crime Hills.
When I was a kid, it wasn't
scary.
that. I guess from everyone that I know in Florida, it's gotten a lot worse. But when I was a kid, this was the early 90s. Pine Hills wasn't a bad place.
Okay.
We lived there, and that was actually my dad's childhood home where he grew up. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Oh, no, I didn't.
When I say dad, I mean my stepdad. Yeah. So my stepdad grew up in that house.
Let's just say
Pine
from this
Hills.
point on, if you're talking about your real dad, you say real dad
Or biological
or
father.
biological father. And
Anytime I just casually say dad, I'm probably
you're
talking
meaning
about my
John.
stepdad.
Yeah.
So, that was his home that he grew up in as a kid, and his mom owned it, and he bought it from his mom.
Oh, I
And
did
then
not
we
know
moved
that.
into it, and we lived there for 4 years in Pine Hills. And I have some really good memories from that
Is
house.
that the house that had like a little entryway thing?
Yeah, it had like a front courtyard.
Courtyard with a gate in the front?
Yeah, so
Okay.
there's like a gate,
I love
a
that.
metal gate, and we had a little ding bell, and so people would ding-ling the little bell, and we'd hear it inside the house.
Ding-a-ling-a-ling.
And so then we'd come out and open the gate and let people in. But there was like this courtyard, and it had a lot of plants and flowers and grass and like lawn chairs. It was very beautiful, shaded all the time. And then we had just a small home, maybe 1,500 square feet. It wasn't very big, but it had a few rooms for everybody and a screen porch in the backyard with a nice yard in the backyard. And we spent a lot of time outside. Like I feel like I grew up in that house. Like that was my childhood home.
Yeah.
Because that's where the majority of my memories of my childhood were. And then we moved in 1997 when I was 11 to Apopka, and that was my like teenage home.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so we're probably looking at 1995 is kind of a big milestone. That was about where we're at as far as my memories.
Okay.
Kind of
That just occurred to me. How many times did you move?
all growing up.
Yeah. Like from the time that you were,
I was born in Portland, Oregon.
and then up until when you left the house.
I was born in Portland, Oregon. We lived in California where Matthew was born. We moved to France. We moved to Florida where Marshall was born. And we lived in a big house. And then we moved to the rental when my mom got the divorce. And then we moved to Pine Hills when my parents bought their first home. And then we moved to Apopka. And then I left home while we were living still in Apopka.
So
7
7.
times.
You used your thumb.
No.
This thumb was pointed out, and then you switched.
Portland, California, France, big house in Florida,
We're debating
rental house
if you
in
want-
Florida, first house in Florida, Apopka.
Okay, so
7.
7 times. So I want to count mine now because I know I moved a lot too. I lived in Kansas, and then I moved to Spring Glen, and then Helper, and then Spanish Fork, and then another
That's
Spanish
all on
Fork.
one finger. You did this. Helper, Candace. Like,
No, see, I did it right. You weren't watching.
how many?
Let me do it
what
again.
number were we
I was
on?
doing this
Oh, you were counting your
on
other
the
hand.
other hand, not like one finger.
So if you're only listening to this through a podcast, we also do YouTube videos. And so if you wanted to watch the video, you could see how she was counting in such a weird way.
I was doing this, moving this hand.
Okay, sorry.
But he's like, that's one.
Sorry. I'll stop distracting your
Okay.
counting.
So, great. Now I have to think. Okay,
No, you got it.
Kansas, Spring Glen, Helper, Spanish Fork, Fountain Green, Mount Pleasant.
7 times.
What?
We both moved 7 times in our lifetime before we became adults.
What?
That's weird.
High five.
And you know what else is interesting? There's 9
We-
kids in my family.
and
there's
9 kids in my
her
family. Not the same family. And then also, your mom gave birth to you when she was 28, and so did my mom.
And your mom gave birth to you when she was 28.
Destiny.
So in 1995, how old were you?
I was 5 turning 6 in 1995
Okay.
because I was born in 1989.
Okay.
So
Any significant
5 turning
memories
6
from that time of your life?
Yeah, so actually we were in our third house that I was in that we had moved to since I was born.
Which house was that?
Helper house,
Okay.
actually. So the Spring Glen house was where I had some of my first memories, where I was like swinging my feet on the counter, singing lollipop, lollipop, ooh, lolly, 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 lollipop, ba boom, 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 over and over again. And then, but the house after that was when I really, really started remembering like everything. I think like I can we actually went back to that house in one of our older videos.
On the beach house.
On the beach house.
Last year.
Yeah.
In January.
Yeah. And I literally walked around the property saying all the memories that I had. And they were just like popping into my head over and over and over and over and over. Because I full on could remember everything at 4.
That was the house that you went swimming in the garbage can.
Yes.
And we talked about that in the last video, I think. That was also the house where you slammed Steven's lips in the doorway.
Yes, I slammed Steven's lips in the doorway. And Andrew had one of those pull, like, motorcycles, you know, that you would pull the wheel and then it would
let it go and
it would zoom. Well, he pulled the wheel back and stuck it in my hair, and it zoomed in my hair, and my hair went and ripped up and like wrapped up all around it.
Oh my goodness.
And then I screamed, Mom, help me! Andrew did
That
this.
reminds me of a story. When I was probably 10, I was chewing gum and I put it in Marshall's hair. Intentionally. Well, here's the back, like my thought process was,
what were you thinking?
Gum gets stuck in hair and doesn't come out, right? So I'm going to do this science experiment where I put it in his hair and see if I can pull it right out without it getting stuck. But I put it in his hair and he freaked out and kind of did this, like, what's going on, you know? And it rubbed all up in his hair and I was like, ah!
You ruined my experiment!
And then, of course, he's like, Michael
put gum in my hair.
Michael put gum in my hair, which is true. But not understanding my thought process, it sounds way worse than it actually was.
I think that's how most kids get in trouble. I think they have an actual theory for something, and they go to test it out, and they get in trouble.
Right. So
and
Andrew,
if we were to sit
with his little motorcycle,
and say,
I'm
what's
sure
going on? Why did you think that? What were you thinking?
I'm sure Andrew had a good reason to put that motorcycle in your hair.
I'm sure. It wasn't because he was being mean. He just wanted to be mean. He was probably mad at me, actually. I was a snot. I fought with Andrew so bad, like growing up. That was.
Would you tease Andrew because of his reactions?
Well, it's.
Because I know you tease Ryan.
When I was younger, I couldn't tease him because he was so much older than me. So I just disagreed with him all the time. Because I saw. This is my perspective as a little child. Andrew and Ryan played all the time with each other. And Jennifer was 6 years older than me. So that was kind of a big gap. So I kind of really hung out with Ryan the most and Steven the most. Because Steven's just younger than me. And I just did not get along with Andrew. A lot of the time, I think it might have been jealousy. Because he was pulling my best friend, Ryan, away from me. I was like, yeah, just because they're boys. They're both boys. They both had the same interests and stuff, and they're close in age. So it was like.
And you didn't have any close sisters.
And
Jennifer was old enough that she didn't really play with you very much.
Jessica's the closest, and she was 4 years younger than me, and for some reason.
Wait, she's 4 years younger than you?
Yeah.
Jessica?
Jessica. And then Jennifer's 6 years older than me.
So
I'm surrounded by boys.
So Jennifer is to you kind of like what James is to Charlie.
Yeah.
So like imagine James playing with Charlie. It wouldn't really make sense.
Happen.
Like, yeah, they get along, but it's not like, hey bud, let's go do something together.
Yeah, it didn't happen like that.
Right.
I mean, actually, I guess she did, but it wasn't natural. It didn't come like best buds. You know, It was just like, oh, we're sisters. We play. You know, but such a big age gap just makes a big difference. So anyways, I fought with Andrew a lot. Like,
well, he's
every
pretty
day.
disagreeable, and I say that in the nicest way possible.
But what was I getting at? That's what I'm wondering. Because it was
Memories
just...
from
Oh, yeah.
Helper.
He put the thing in my hair. We fought all the time.
Who threw your boot into the pond in the winter?
I think that was both of them, Andrew and Ryan.
That was in the same house, right?
Combined effort. They also pinned me down and shoved a grasshopper down my throat. Which, now if I saw one of our kids do that to one of our other kids, I would freak out.
What did your mom do?
I think she was just like...
Don't
do that. No, she probably punished them, but it was like, now we talk about it and it's funny. But seriously, who does that? don't shove grasshoppers down people's throats.
This is just a science experiment. What will happen if we throw a grasshopper?
I remember it kicking in my throat. I remember the feeling of it being like kick, and I was like, ah!
That's a traumatic experience. Are you terrified
I
of
was
grasshoppers
4.
now?
I don't play with grasshoppers, that's for sure.
Oh, that reminds me of a traumatic experience I had when we lived in Pine Hills.
Oh, what?
We were catching bugs. And at this time in my life, I wasn't afraid of bugs yet. But this is the story of how I became afraid of bugs.
This is the story of how I became afraid of bugs.
So we were catching bugs, and I found a worm, and I dug up this worm. And I was holding the worm in my hand, and I was looking at it, and it was like dirty, and it was like kind of a gray color. And all of a sudden, what I thought was a tongue, bright pink, sticks out of the worm like it's sticking its tongue out at me. And I freaked out, and I threw the worm on the ground. I was like, "Ah!" Like, this worm stuck its tongue out at me. It was so terrifying. It was freaky. And from that moment on, I've never trusted bugs.
I don't trust you. You might stick your tongue out.
They might do something unexpected and terrify me.
Transform in front of your face.
In the same house, I saw a caterpillar that had all these little, like, I'm trying to remember it in my mind how it looked. It was like spiky. It was one of those fuzzy caterpillars. It was really big, but it had like all these like worm things coming out of it.
Worm?
Yeah, almost like, and I think I read about this later, and I think like wasps or hornets would like put their eggs inside of caterpillars.
That sounds horrifying.
And it was so like nasty, like freaky, gross that added to my phobia of insects.
That gives me trypophobia.
Yeah, so I'm like terrified of insects now.
That's gross. Well, you know what?
When I
don't blame you, because Florida has some incredibly disgusting,
huge cockroaches, huge spiders,
huge beetles, huge grasshoppers, huge crickets, like huge. And I'm saying, like, I saw one the size of a mouse.
A grasshopper?
Yeah.
Yep.
That is too big.
And spiders with a leg span the size of my hands.
Yes. Yes. And that is horrifying. Ugh. Florida, when we lived in Florida, there were so many gross things that I saw that I've never seen in my life that were bugs. And I was like, I'm going to die.
I remember
I will die here.
In that same house.
Bugs will kill me.
So in Pine Hills, one time I was really, really sick. And I remember I'd been sick all day, and I hadn't eaten anything all day. And I was laying on the floor, and my feet were like all the way against the wall underneath the TV. And I was looking up at the TV. I don't know why I was laying like this, but my legs were like underneath the TV stand. And I was watching the TV all day, just kind of laying there looking up at the TV. And all of a sudden I felt something moving on my legs. Like a tickling feeling, kind of like moving up my leg. And I was like, and I looked, and I saw a spider crawling up my leg. A big spider. And I flicked my leg, and the spider went flying, and I screamed and yelled, and it was like very scary.
That is horrifying. In Florida, I saw the weirdest looking gigantor spider in the kitchen on the floor. It was crawling across the floor like an old, almost dying spider. I was like, what is wrong with that spider? What is wrong with that? And I looked closer, and the whole thing was covered in crawling baby spiders.
The spider was covered in crawling babies. I've seen that before too. The big spider
was covered in its babies.
Yep.
And it was so scary that I took a flip-flop and I lifted it above my head, and I was like, I have to kill it.
You have to kill all of them.
I have to kill all of them in one. So I hit as hard as I could. But the wind, just the wind from the flip-flop coming down on them, exploded all the baby spiders everywhere, all over the floor. They were in every single spot on the floor, and I was screaming bloody murder and hitting everything with my flip-flop, because I did not know it was going to make them all go whoosh, because they are just so light that just the tiny bit of wind from the flip-flop made them go everywhere. And then I was just I mean, it was so scary. It was so. Ever since then, I saw like a few more after that. I always went very slowly and then squished them. So I got them all in one, and I didn't have to be screaming. Oh my goodness!
You learned the right way to kill spiders. Hey, while we're on the topic of spider memories, I have to share this now because otherwise I might forget. Melanie, when she was driving home from church one day, and she was a teenager, and I wasn't with her in the car, She was driving a big white van, which was our family van. As she was driving down the street, there was a car in front of her getting ready to make a right turn, and so it was slowing down, but she didn't notice this because she was distracted. There was a spider coming down on the visor. So she's driving, she sees the spider, she freaks out about the spider, so she's not looking at the road to realize that the car in front of her is slowing down to make a right turn, and she rear-ended him really, really hard and totaled the vehicle. Because she was so scared of that spider.
That's so sad. That's when you slam on your brakes.
Yeah, spiders are no joke.
But you know what? What the ironic part about all of this is all the spiders we saw in Florida wouldn't kill you.
Oh, yeah. They're not
They
toxic.
don't kill you.
Right.
But here in Utah, the ones that I know, well, I am scared of black widows, but we have black widows all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And I am more scared of Florida spiders than I am of Utah spiders.
Totally.
Just because it's what I'm familiar with versus what I'm not familiar with.
If there's a spider this big, but it's really, really toxic and will kill you, or a spider this big that won't hurt even at all, this is going to be way more scary to me. I can't get that out of my mind.
Yes.
No matter how hard I try.
It's scary. All of them are scary.
So in Pine Hills, while we were living there, my dad would play sports with us a lot in the backyard. I remember playing football. We have home videos of us playing football in the yard. I remember learning how to play baseball in that yard. I remember on a lot of times during Sunday, like Sundays after church, we'd come home and we'd play sports, and then we'd go over to my grandma's house, which was my stepdad's mom, and we'd go to her community pool, and we'd go swim at her house, and then we'd usually watch a movie or something at her house afterwards. And I feel like this was something that we did a lot of, like maybe an entire summer, every single Sunday. It was just kind of a habit.
Or else you wouldn't really remember it that much.
Yeah. But I remember doing it a lot.
Yeah.
And it was a really fun time. I remember learning how to swim in that pool. It was like a neighborhood pool. And I remember doing chicken fighting on my dad's back. And I remember him swimming with us around. They had a diving board, and we'd walk off the diving board, and just such good memories.
That sounds like fun. And now we can provide that for people because we have a swimming pool in our house.
I wish we had a diving board. It's not deep enough, I guess.
Yeah, it's not really deep enough. Unless it was a belly flop diving board. Then it's deep enough. I know this is a little bit off topic. Maybe we should talk about this in the next podcast. But I was thinking we should talk about why our moms and dads had so many kids. Like the reason, you know?
Oh, well, this goes back to our origins. So I feel like that's something.
Well, let's talk about it in the next podcast because I feel like I could talk about a lot in that, you know?
Well, I had another idea of what I wanted to talk about in the next podcast, but if you want to talk about that, I guess that's fine.
Something that, so 1996.
I think you should talk about it now.
1996. Well, I have something else I want to talk about.
Oh, okay.
It pertains to kind of that year.
Okay.
My parents were actually driving, and this is a miracle. But they were driving. Maybe we should talk about this in the Miracles podcast. We're going to talk about that too.
No, that's after we got married.
Okay. So, my mom was pregnant with her 8th child in 1996. No, 7th child. Technically 8 because she had one of them pass away. But anyways, so my sister Amanda she was pregnant with my sister Amanda. She was 8 months pregnant. And we were moving. So we were living in Helper, and we were moving to Spanish Fork into a rental from like this tiny, tiny house, the one that I have all of my like first memories in. And they were driving, and typically my mom would follow my dad. My dad would go in front, and my mom would just follow him. And he was like in a bigger vehicle. She was in a smaller car. And both of them at the same time, as they were driving, decided to pull over and talk to each other, and they just felt like they should switch places. So she drives in front and he follows her, and they don't do that. They just don't do that. But they decided to do that, and it was a snowy day, like it was raining a lot. The night before it rained, and then it snowed the next day. So all of the roads were actually covered in black ice, which just means you can't see it. It's on the road, but you cannot see the ice at all. And it's not like snow covered road where you're like, oh, I need to drive carefully. And I honestly, I think black ice is more dangerous than snow, because snow is a little bit more grippy than ice. So they were driving, and this car out of nowhere from the other lane comes head first and smashes into my dad, and both of the cars spin, and my mom pulls over to the side of the road, and somehow they all end up on the side of the road. Well, there was a cliff too, by the way, on the other side, but she smashed into my dad, and they all ended up lined up on the side of the road perfectly, off of the road somehow.
Like by the mountainside.
By the mountainside. And the crazy part is, if they hadn't gotten that prompting, that feeling, that lady would have smashed into my mom, killing her and the baby. It would have, because of how bad the accident was,
of how small your mom's
and how
little
small
car was.
the car was.
Yeah. Versus your dad's big old truck.
Yeah, and he was wearing a seatbelt, thankfully, but he had a bruise the whole length of his seatbelt on his chest. I remember that. And it was a dang good thing he was wearing it, or else I don't think I'd have a dad right now, you know.
Wow.
But anyways, there was also a cliff on the other side, and if she hadn't have smashed into him, she would have died too. They both ran over to her after, because my dad was fine, everybody was fine, except for she was unconscious, and she had pulled the whole steering wheel, bent it, because she was trying so hard with her hands to change directions, and she had so much adrenaline and just superhuman strength through that that she literally bent the steering wheel trying to turn and couldn't do it, and smashed into my dad. And then they were all okay, and she didn't go off the cliff. So it's just so interesting. That is one of those that is such a miracle to me, that my mom didn't die. She didn't lose the baby. The other lady didn't die. Everybody lived. And it was all because of this small feeling that they got. And that was literally when we were moving. So that's why they were following each other. They both had things in the car. And I think Jennifer was with all of the kids. She was, I don't know, 12. Or actually, I think we were at my grandma's house. But we were being watched over. And they were too.
I have a story of superhuman strength.
Yeah?
When I was a teenager, I remember I was walking in the house, and I was walking around, and I heard my mom in the garage yelling and screaming like she was in pain or scared or something.
Yeah.
And I ran as fast as I could.
How old were you? A teenager?
I was a teenager, probably 14.
Yeah.
Or 15, and I ran into the garage, and a huge pile of like plywood boards had tipped over and fallen on my mom.
Whoa.
And she was pinned. I think we had just a bunch of junk in the garage, and so she was kind of pinned up against all this stuff with all these boards leaning on top of her, and she couldn't move.
Wow.
She couldn't lift them, and she was trapped.
I don't think I've ever heard this story.
Well, it just never came up, I guess. And I just ran up, and I got underneath the boards, and I just pushed all of them at the same time. Like, rather than moving one board at a time, I just pushed all of them and pushed them back up against the wall so she could get free.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, like,
my hero.
I remember thinking, like, that was really heavy, and I think adrenaline helped me to do it.
Oh, totally.
Because I was pretty scrawny as a teenager, and I don't think
true.
I had enough upper body strength to actually do that. But because I was like pumping with adrenaline, just like I have to save my mom, like I didn't even think twice. I just, you know.
And there were probably some bodybuilding angels around you helping you out a little bit.
Definitely. And I moved all the boards and felt pretty good. That was kind of cool.
That's amazing.
So,
I've never heard that story before.
Thought that was applicable to this time.
Oh, that's great.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I think we're going to call that an episode.
I think that's it for this episode of kind of moving a lot and some of our childhood memories from around the 1993, 94, 95-ish.
Yeah.
In the next episode, I want to talk about going to public school for my first time.
Oh.
Because I was homeschooled before that.
I want want to talk about our parents and why they had so many dang kids.
That's a good thing to talk about.
Okay.
So stay tuned to next week, you guys. Thank you for tuning into Beach Theory. We're available anywhere you find podcasts and also here on YouTube every single week. We love you guys. We appreciate your support and keep coming back for more every single day.
All right.
Beach Theory out.
Bye.